When I was creating Dukes of Hazzard, I had both the arena in mind, a small country town in the South, and the characters. Uncle Jesse is the head of the family.
I ain't, sir. I'm your Uncle Jesse.
Nobody is anybody until that nobody takes a number. Now?
You know, if you keep imitating Miss Tisdale, you're gonna be the first old maid in the Duke family tree.
Bo, Luke, and Daisy are cousins. Their parents were killed in an automobile wreck, and Uncle Jesse brought them in and raised them and created this family. So it's in effect a synthetic family, and therefore they have to work to make the family unit function. The other relationships are Boss and Roscoe. Boss is married to Roscoe's older sister, played wonderfully by Peggy Ray. And then Cooter and Enos and Cletus, who came along for these ancillary characters, they have no relationship, except in this particular case, all these people knew everybody from the time they were born. I mean, that's how thick it was in Hazzard County.
I can't slow down, the brakes ain't working.
In the creation of the two young leads, Luke and Bo, were created simultaneously because they'd be playing off of each other. Luke being the older, more experienced, Bo being the younger, kind of the pretty boy. Luke had been in the military. He was also a driver, but he was the one that Bo would look up to. One of the main things you do in drama, particularly in television, is keep the conflict alive. And so they had to have contrary opinions going all the time. And when you had these two side by side, that was easy. It was to make the writing easier for the writers. The network and the studio were extremely generous with me, and when they got hold of this thing, since they didn't know what it was, they didn't know what to do with it, they didn't know how to relate to it, they realized early on, it's got to be cast right. And so they gave me plenty of time to cast it. And so we read actors from all over Hollywood. We had actors from New York. We read actors from every place.
Screen test, Tom Wopat, John Schneider. Take one, scene one.
And sometimes we would go over to CBS, and we would go at the end of their day where they would be doing soap operas, and we would put these guys on camera and put them in a situation.
I don't like this. Not a smidgen.
Well, all we're doing is looking around.
We're breaking and entering.
We ain't broke nothing.
Our guys kept going again and again, and finally these two beat everybody out. They didn't walk away, just walk in and say, gee, this guy's perfect. I had felt from the first time I saw John, I couldn't imagine anybody any better. But we also had to deal with this problem of he had no experience. In Tom's case, there were other actors who had that same ability. Tom's great advantage was Tom was raised on a farm. And Tom, although he'd been on Broadway, he knew the rural setting. And so he was able to keep and understand exactly what we were doing with these characters. And so when the two of them met and they worked, the chemistry between them was just exactly right. And we could easily do any of the conflicts that we needed in the story.
Hey, sugar, you up here?
The character for Daisy, that was easy to do because every Southern boy has his idealized Southern girlfriend. She's the girl you always want to have. She's the girl you fall in love with. She's the cheerleader. She's the one that you had always hoped for. In Daisy's case, Daisy was not a cheerleader. We wanted to have her a working girl who'd work the bars and that sort of thing. And so we needed someone who could also be the romantic, show us a romantic interest. We had people constantly showing up on the show, falling in love with Daisy and leaving. And this was a device for us to keep a romantic interest going. We could do it with the two guys, each of them having a girlfriend, or we could have a guest star coming in and falling in love with Daisy. When I wrote that one out, I said, that'll be the hardest thing to cast. We'll never find this girl. Because we wanted to be Southern, and most of the Southern accents that I had heard when I came out here, they just didn't fit. Then they brought a flock of actresses in, and some of them were really quite good. And I thought, this is fine. But the producer said, I don't know what you're visualizing, but I'm not visualizing these girls from what you had on the paper. Well, I was, of course, in my mind, I was dazzled by these different girls, and oh my, she's perfect. This one's great. Kathy came in and she read, and she wasn't what I had visualized. For some reason, I had visualized a blonde. And when Kathy came in and she read, she had this just dazzling, sparkling personality, this sense of humor that was just, when she came in, it lit the room up.
Hey, Uncle Jesse. Hi, boys.
Hey.
Can I bring you something from home or cook you up a little something special?
And so when we read her against the boys, particularly Tom and John, there was just a natural chemistry. And I could say, yeah, these three could actually be cousins. Every scene that I had given them to do, she just fell right into the slot. When I saw that we now had Tom and John and Kathy, I realized we had our cast.
There's my ID right there. Driver's license, Hazzard County, Jesse Duke.
Uncle Jesse was based upon my grandfather, who was a farmer and had been a school teacher in Kentucky. And he was a great raconteur storyteller. He became the character, the moral center for Dukes of Hazzard, so that they never wanted to disappoint him. Again, there's a point of conflict. By the same token, they never wanted to lie to him. And I don't think our characters ever lied to Uncle Jesse.
Now you just hold it right there.
Which was an important point in our story. You know, you have to remember that Bo and Luke were paroled moonshine drivers. Uncle Jesse was paroled. And so if we keep a moral center with these people, as very often happens, you might have to lie to the outsider. You might have to lie to a crooked cop. You never lie to each other. And Uncle Jesse had to have that kind of character that forced that on each of our characters. In getting Denver Pyle, it was just an absolutely perfect match. Denver had had a long career as a character actor, had played every kind of role conceivable. And when he stepped in to the role of Uncle Jesse, he also became a father figure very quickly to the other three actors. You hear about this happening, we saw it happen, and it truly did happen.
Hey, this is a mighty good appetizer. I wonder what I should have for my main course.
Boss Hogg was based upon a situation that they had in Georgia at that time. Boss Hogg was the county commissioner. County commissioners in the state of Georgia were extremely powerful because they ran the counties and they had all sorts of influence in the legislature. And if you got a good county commissioner, I mean, you were very lucky. If you got a crooked one, he could determine where the roads went. He could determine everything, where the tax money went. And so the fun of this was to have the county commissioner be crooked and be in cahoots with the sheriff, which gave us this unusual situation in which the heroes of our show were criminals, so that when people are in trouble in the county, they don't go to the sheriff because he's crooked, they have to go to the Dukes. And so that even when the Dukes dealt with him in his worst possible way, there was always a way to pull him out of it or get out of it some way. So that very often, Boss Hogg was in trouble as much as anybody else because he would bring outsiders in and they would have to help rescue him in the situation. This allowed us to broaden the base and get away from the cliches of a continual bad villain. If you have to have a bad man, it's the same bad man every week. So we brought in villains from the outside. He would be in cahoots with them. And it allowed us to get that other thing, the warm human thing, were people you didn't like, but in the last minute you ended up helping them out. And this was something that I had grown up with and seen all the time. We were fortunate enough in getting Sorrel Book as our Boss Hogg. Sorrel was a drama graduate of Yale. He had this delicious way of playing comedy. And when I saw him do it, it was just amazing.
I start out in a steam box, I end up in an Olympic gin.
That's a naughty. Now you're not cooperating.
Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane was based upon a crooked sheriff that I knew in South Georgia, whom I will not name. He was running a speed trap in South Georgia and making a lot of money on it. He was working with the county commissioner. Between the two of them, they kept money going on the speed trap, but they also controlled the gambling in the county. In fact, it was said that if they arrested you and you had to spend the night, if you needed to gamble, there was a place you could go to do that, so they could take your money there too. This was the basic premise of a crooked policeman who was also funny, but he was also a good law enforcement officer if he had to be. And when we got James Best, the big advantage of getting Jimmy Best was that Jimmy was a great character actor. Jimmy had done features, he'd done television, he'd done all sorts of stuff like this. Jimmy had very little opportunity to play comedy, and Jimmy was a terrific comedic actor.
That was a horrendous crash.
He could take anything and make it work. And so when we got him, we had a chance to just broaden the character of the sheriff and letting him be less of a villain and let him play off of Boss Hogg. They were our safety valve on comedy because we could sidetrack, we could go any kind of situation and throw them into it, and they played off each other all the time. It was literally like having Laurel and Hardy, where if you give them a situation, they could go with it. It was all scripted, but they had these nuances, these way of being subtle, the way of playing off of each other, we would write a desperate situation, they would make it much more desperate. And this was due to our fortunate casting of Sorrel and Jimmy. Deputy Enos Strait was one of the most unusual casting things that ever happened in my life. I had gone to school with Sonny Schroyer. We were both at the University of Georgia together, and I had directed him in a commercial. When I wrote the character, Deputy Enos Strait, I had Sonny in mind because there were certain peculiarities of Sonny's character that just fit Deputy Enos. When I wrote the thing out and I gave it to the producer, and the producer went to Georgia. I was staying here, I was still writing the first episode. The producer went to Georgia and they had a general casting call. And I told him, I said, when you get down there, I said, for the character Enos, see if you can find an actor named Sonny Schroyer. He forgot that note. He goes down there and he's reading all these people. He called me back and he said, well, I don't have anybody else. He said, but I think we found our character to play Deputy Enos. And I said, who's that? He said, well, it's an actor I found named Sonny Schroyer. Now, I had written it for Sonny. He lost my notes. Sonny walks in, reads it so well, he's cast immediately. Sonny Schroyer was the first person cast in Dukes of Hazzard.
Don't you do that! No! Enos! Enos! Don't you go away, Paul!
The function of the Enos character was to give somebody for Roscoe to play off of. Somebody who was extremely naive, somebody who, if he thought the sheriff was being crooked, he kind of overlooked that, or the sheriff wouldn't really be crooked. I mean, he had to be very naive, very honest, and he had to be desperately in love with Daisy. And of course, those are just characters of American drama when you have the boy who has the crush. And of course, when we've got that, we have something that every country boy, every teenager has had that kind of crush. And to put it in a character in his late 20s who still got the high school crush, was something that we knew the audience could identify with immediately. And of course, Sonny could play that so beautifully, and Daisy knew exactly how to play off of that.
Thank you, Daisy.
Yeah.
Sound like the general got a case of the rockin' pneumonia and the boogie-woogie flu. What's the trouble?
Cooter's a very interesting character because Cooter's based upon, again, Southern car culture. When I was a kid in Kentucky, we had the general store, and next to the general store was the barbershop, next to the barbershop was the garage. And so on Saturday, everybody in the county was either at one of those places. And the thing about the top mechanic was that he had a very high standing in the rural community. You had the doctor and then next to him was the preacher, and next to him was the mechanic, because he kept everything running. Young boys would go down on Saturday morning to the garage and just sit there and listen to these tall tales going on. Cooter was the typical mechanic who could fix anything. He could fix anything but a broken heart. And so we played off of that kind of character. And we got Ben Jones. Ben Jones was, he was a Southerner, but I had directed Ben before. Ben was a classically trained actor. I mean, he'd done theater. And so when we got him, and he knew all these nuances of the Southern character, there was no other serious, once I saw we could get Ben, Ben was cast immediately.
Get everything that wiggles, crawls, or bites out of there first, all right?
Now, who'd have ever figured that anything so peaceful would get the Dukes into more trouble than a bee romancing a buzzsaw? And in Hazzard, trouble usually begins here.
We don't have a narrator. We have a balladeer. And he can talk, or maybe he can sing. And I said the perfect voice for that is Waylon Jennings. Now, the function of the balladeer was to give us that each story was a ballad. And so he kind of kicked it off the same way. It also gave us a narration for every show. So that every time we got into trouble, the balladeer could come in and make some comment, like a Greek chorus.
It all started on one of them Hazzard spring mornings. Flowers were a-popping open, alfalfa was a-blowing in the breeze, and the bees were making out with their honeys.
The advantage was that we could do this country style. So some of our better jokes we would give to Waylon, because he would comment on what was going on.
Come on, Bo.
Ain't them Dukes something? They can climb out of a wrecked car without a scratch and can't walk straight across a board.
It gave us a chance to constantly comment on what we were doing without being obtrusive. We could do it in a funny manner. Also, if we got in a situation, and this was particularly true, where we had to bridge something with some action that we didn't get to shoot, maybe it rained or something like that, we put a balladeer line in there, that covers it, we're on the next scene, and away we go.
Well, the boys are off and running. And the Hazzard Gazette clock is running. But as for Daisy and Uncle Jesse, time was standing still while they pondered on what to do next.
And occasionally we would say, okay, how do we get from point A to point B? We said, let the balladeer bridge it. Then instead of having a whole page of dialogue, Waylon will say, oh, well, it looks to me like so-and-so is going on, and sure enough, here it is. One sentence, and we're there. And so this allowed our scripts to be very compact. And it was unusual in our script, our page count. We had an enormous amount of action, enormous amount of stuff going on that we were able to bridge with Waylon's comments.
And the intrepid Cletus Speed Trap strikes again. If he don't get something soon, he's going to have to hang around the roller rink.
There's a 20 in it for you if you lose it.
Mister, save your money. What my cousin's trying to say is that we're gonna lose them, but it's on the house. It's a little game we play. Just hold tight.
We had 7 characters in the show of actors. We had an 8th character, and that was the car, General Lee. And the critical thing about General Lee was that was a way to get the Southern car culture attitudes across. In the South, there was a saying among these boys that on Friday night, you hauled moonshine. On Saturday, you went to the race and drove it. On Sunday morning, you drove Mama to church. The car was an integral part of Southern culture. Out west, it was the horse. In the South, it was the car. And so General Lee became a character. Well, I had thought of a Trans Am at that time. But I didn't like that because it was too much, it was the hottest car anybody was using it. So wisely enough, the director said, let's let the transportation guys pick us a car. And I said, okay. So we relinquished that control. The transportation guy calls me and he says, I found us a car. He says, what color you want? I said, well, maybe orange. He said, okay. So I got a phone call and he said, I'm gonna bring the car over. I went out of my office, he turned the corner and General Lee drove up and I fell in love. And I said, what is that? He said, that's a '69 Dodge Charger. Then we added the other things, like we welded the doors shut. That's the only way you could get in and out. Most people didn't know that stock cars are welded shut. And so Bo and Luke are always going in and out the window. And they're having to push Uncle Jesse in and out the window. And that became a signature part of our show because kids all over America suddenly fell in love with the idea of a car that the only way you could get in and out of was the windows. I had originally even named him after General Lee's horse, Traveler. I said, you know, a lot of Southerners know this, and the producer looked at me and said, are you crazy? He says, that car's got to be General Lee. And of course, he was absolutely right. The character Flash, which was Jimmy's dog, a basset hound, that came out of James Best.
Flash! Steve! She did it.
He came in and said, I want a pet, and I want a dog. I want somebody he can talk with. And I'm thinking, oh, good, Doberman, attack dog, something like that, or a police dog. And Jimmy expressed, I says, no, this dog has got to be sad. He's got to be, he is the dog personification, in effect, of what Roscoe is, And so we wrote him into the scripts. As I look back now on the series, and with the characters that I originally wrote, and then see what the actors did with it, I consider myself one of the luckiest writers to ever hit this town, because they really did pretty much fulfill the initial image of what I had. And as they grew, they kept it alive and they kept it honest. And that's what gave us a great series.
You